Good afternoon, respected doctors. I am Dr. Rajneesh Dedia from the Medical Services of MQ Pharmaceutical. Welcome all of you for the today's scientific meeting. We at the MQR are on the mission to nurture and support the 28 days of ovarian cycle, programming 28, which is foundation of ART. Programming 28 is based on the concept of programming or managing the ovarian cycle by exogenous administration of the drugs like gonadotropins, GnRH agonists, GnRH antagonists as per the different protocol to improve ART outcome. MQR promised to deliver all possible supports in terms of therapeutic agents and academic support for programming 28. Dear doctors, we have been locked down since last 1.5 months to fight against the corona pandemic. So we thought to take your valuable time to be utilized for the scientific meetings. So today we have with us a renowned infertility specialist, Dr. Latika Agarwal, ma'am. Ma'am is IVF specialist from Sarthak Test Tube Baby Center, Bareilly. Dr. Latika Agarwal has been a gold medalist during graduation and post-graduation. During her post-graduation, Dr. Latika Agarwal had the credit of many papers published in various reputed journals. She completed her residency from University College of Medical Science, New Delhi. She has also presented papers in national and international conferences. Dr. Latika has successfully organized IFS conference in 2013 at Bareilly. She has also organized scientific sessions during 22nd annual conference of FOXY UP chapter in the year 2010 at Bareilly. Dr. Latika is senior gynecologist and is practicing as private consultant at self-owned Sarthak Test Tube Baby Center, Bareilly for the last 7 years. Dr. Latika is associated with world-renowned Dr. Jaideep and Dr. Narendra Malhotra from Rainbow Hospital of Agra since 2013 for delivering ultimate results in the field of IVF and ET. So with this brief introduction, I'll hand over the session to Dr. Latika Agarwal. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajesh, for the kind words. Now this is time to start the talk. As you know, weather is very lovely outside. It's raining, it's windy. I'm really enjoying and hope you enjoy my webinar. So good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Rajesh, I'm not able to see the whole slide because your pictures and Dr. Amit Bose's picture are coming.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be communicating with you all today. And I am going to speak on a very important subject, which all of you encounter often in your practice, that is optimizing intrauterine insemination success. So recently, many webinars have been organized on intrauterine insemination. So I am not going to repeat the basics of IUI. Many of you do IUI in your clinic, in your practice, and many of you refer your patients to other clinics for IUI. So for both of you, this particular talk should be of pretty significant importance. There are no secret to success. It's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. And nowhere is learning from failure more relevant as in the treatment of IUI. Because despite years and years of experience, this particular study shows the European Registry of European Society of Human Reproduction that more than 1.7 lakhs IUI with the husband semen done, and the success rate, the live take-home baby rate, the delivery rate was just 8.9%. Pretty this much success rate, considering we have so many years of experience in this particular field. However, the results are little better when we do IUI with donor semen, that is 13.8%. But however, if you persist in the IUI, if you do 3 cycles or more, the final cumulative pregnancy rate does become a responsible, reasonable 40%. So you have to tell your patients right from the beginning that IUI is not a single treatment, but a series of treatments, couple of months at least. So in IUI, proper counseling of the patient is necessary. Otherwise, as you see in day-to-day practice, patients and family members are very much disappointed even after single IUI. So pre-IUI workup. All of you, whether you actually do IUI in your clinic or not, need to prepare the patient for IUI, that is pre-IUI workup. Diagnostic evaluation of the infertile female practice committee of the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. The American Society for Reproductive Medicine has actually recommended minimal preparation or investigation prior to IUI. They say all that you need to do is a test for assessment of ovarian function. Make sure the uterus is reasonably normal looking on sonography. Check the patency of the tube and do a semen analysis. And ovarian reserve testing is not mandatory. Laparoscopy routinely is required only if you suspect a major pathology like endometriosis, tubal occlusion disease, or peritoneal factors. And postcoital test and endometrial biopsy are really not to be done. So before going for IUI, we have to be very sure at least one tube should be open, otherwise no IUI to be done. Patient workup. However, I prefer to do at least one ovarian reserve testing, which either typically an anti-mullerian hormone and a baseline sonography to measure the antral follicle count, because we are seeing lots and lots of patients on a daily basis with premature ovarian failure. We don't want to keep treating a patient and finding out later that ovarian reserve is really poor. So basic ovarian test, a transvaginal sonography, hysteroscopy in patients in which there is a suspicion of any pathology, and of course, a detailed semen analysis and culture. Prolactin and TSH is not mandatory, but this is not required for IUI, but you can go for TSH and prolactin for infertility workup. TB PCR or gene expert to be done in only suspected cases of genital tuberculosis. So factors affecting pregnancy rate. One of the most important factors affecting pregnancy rate is the age of the patient, the ovarian age of the patient, and of course, why she's infertile, right? And eventually what you are going to treat her infertility and what drugs are you using for ovulation induction, and how are you doing the monitoring of the cycles, timing and number of insemination, number of cycles, and luteal support. So all of these factors play an important role, eventually affecting the pregnancy outcome and pregnancy rate. Factors influencing the outcome of IUI. So age, like I said, is one of the most important factors. As the age increases, the AMH declines, the antral follicle count declines, and of course the FSH increases. So these are directly related to outcome of intra-uterine insemination, along with the course, the total motile sperm count. So these are some of the most important effects upon fertility outcome. Live birth rate does not show any correlation with male age. Only semen quality is important. And if we see miscarriages, excuse me, miscarriage rate also showed a strong correlation with increasing female age. In fact, a very nice recent study showed this on older patients. A study was done, randomized control trial to determine optimal infertility treatment in older couples who were around 30 to 40 years old. It was found whether you treated them with clomiphene or the gonadotropins and IUI or did an IVF, it was found that majority, in fact 84% of all the actual live birth that took place resulted from the IVF treatment. So the patients became pregnant much faster and the success rates were much higher with IVF in the older age group. So always remember that older patients don't waste much time on IUI, go on to IVF much faster. Conclusion is this: superior pregnancy rates with fewer treatment cycle in the immediate IVF groups as compared to more number of IVF cycles. Etiology of infertility. What is the cause of infertility in infertile patient affects outcome of IUI. Like tubal factors. For example, tubal factor, if she has one tube blocked, this is a very important slide. If she has one tube blocked, diagnosed by hysterosalpingography, In that also, whether it is a proximal block or a distal block, have a significantly poorer outcome. We have to see whether it is a proximal block or distal block. If the one tube is blocked and it is a distal block, it have a significantly poorer outcome than those with the unilateral proximal block. And the ones with the distal block, you are better off recommending them for IVF faster than otherwise. So when we prepare a patient for IUI, you have to see the tubes. If the tube is blocked, you have to see whether it is a proximal or distal. If you see this is a distal block, results is going to be very, very poor. So don't take such type of patients. Clinical analysis of 65 cases of laparoscopic treatment on tubal infertility caused by tubal distortion. This is also very important. Even when you are doing a laparoscopy and you find that one tube is a little bit adherent and twisted upon itself, the angle of the twist on the end in the tube is also important. And it is very important. If the tube is just a little bit bent on itself, that is more than 45-degree angle, that is not acute angle, then the success rate after your laparoscopy visualizes are much better. However, if the tube is completely acutely twisted, bent upon itself, the results even after laparoscopic surgery will be pretty pathetic. So in this study, what we did, patients with tubal infertility were divided into 3 groups based on the tubal distortion degree. That is minimum angle of tubal distortion less than 45 degree A group, a distortion angle between 45 degrees and 90 degree B group, and a distortion angle between 90 to 145 degree C group. The total pregnancy rate of these were 43.75%, with an intrauterine pregnancy rate 40.23% and an ectopic pregnancy rate was 3.5%. But when we see the result in the groups, in group A, pregnancy rate after operation 33.33%, in group B it was 48.72%, and in group C it was 60%. So we see that if angle of distortion is less than 45 degree, that is acutely distorted, results are really poor. And when the angle of distortion is wider, that is 90 to 45 degree, 145 degree, results are better. Next is endometriosis. Endometriosis, if laparoscopy is done for some other indications, then ablate or excise endometriotic lesions. Otherwise, a small lesion need not to be operated. If there is a very tiny cyst, need not to be operated unless you are doing a laparoscopy for some other reasons. So in the patient who is less than 35 years age with stage 1 or 2 endometriosis, associated infertility, expected treatment is superovulation with IUI, can be the first line of therapy. When the age is more than 35 years, control ovarian hyperstimulation with IUI or IVF should be considered. Stage 3 and 4 endometriosis, surgical therapy alone or followed by IVF may be effective. So if you see a patient is older, more than 35 years, and having grade 3 and 4 degree of endometriosis, directly refer the patient for IVF, not trying IVF. But if they are endometriomas, it is now proven that endometriomas less than 3 centimeter, you do not need to operate. Larger than that, may need surgery prior to ART. However, remember the moment you operate on a patient for endometrioma, there is a significant loss of ovarian follicles and ovarian reserve, may reduce significantly. So clinicians should counsel women with endometriosis regarding the risk of reduced ovarian function after surgery and the possible loss of the ovary. A decision to proceed with surgery should be considered carefully if the woman has had previous ovarian surgery. Now the fibroids, association of fibroids and pregnancy outcome after control ovarian stimulation IUI for unexplained infertility. There is a dramatic change in the attitude, and this very recent study shows that there is literally no difference in outcome if you remove or don't remove non-cavity distorting fibroid, irrespective of the size. So the only indication for the removal of the fibroids today is almost all cases submucous biomas. So even if a large fibroid you see, this is not submucous and this is not distorting the cavity, you no need to remove this fibroid. You can go ahead with IUI. Hysteroscopy for treating subfertility associated with the suspected major uterine endometrial abnormalities. So submucous myomas, hysteroscopic removal is fantastic. Gives much better outcome. This is shown even in the Cochrane review come out recently. Even removal of small polyps hysteroscopically gives you much better outcomes for pregnancy. So these two things are the only reason why you would go for hysteroscopy prior to ART. More studies are needed to substantiate the effectiveness of the hysteroscopic removal of suspected endometrial polyps, submucous fibroids, uterine septum, or intrauterine adhesions in women with unexplained subfertility or prior to IUI, IVF, or ICSI. Now the male factor. Male factor incidence today in your practice, we can see it is increasing dramatically. That is more than 50%. When you are offering these male factor patients, maybe mild male factor patients, IUI is a treatment. Remember to tell them that 6 IUI cycle is equal to 1 cycle of ICSI or intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So patient should be aware that IUI is not a single treatment. Multiple cycles are required in male factor infertility, and maybe there will be a better off with ICSI as a treatment. We should not try IUI. There are several, when there is severe male factors, that is count is less than 5 million, for them ICSI is a better choice. Effect of sperm morphology and number on success of IUI. So remember that if there is a IUI being used for male factor infertility, it has very little chance of success if the lady is older than 35 years of age. The number of semen sperms injected is less than 5 million motile sperms, and the morphology is less than 30%. So you need to have a reasonably good sperm parameter before you can expect outcome in IUI. Now to control ovarian stimulation, this is a very important part of IUI. IUI for unexplained subfertility, Cochrane Database Systemic Review 2012, and many other have shown that IUI in a natural cycle gives the small outcomes. Doing ovarian stimulation without following it up with an IUI also gives a small outcome. So it's a combination of the two things, that is IUI and ovarian stimulation, which manages to give reasonably good outcomes. Now this is a very important slide. Now we'll go to control ovarian stimulation. Many of you, I think all of you are familiar with the drugs which we use for the control ovarian stimulation, that is clomiphene citrate. You can use 50 to 100 milligram from day 3 to 7 or day 2 to 6. Letrozole, you can use 2.5 to 5 milligram from day 2 to 6 or day 3 to 7. We can combine this CC or letrozole with gonadotropins, either HMG or FSH, that is either 75 or 150 units. Whenever you finish your clomiphene citrate and letrozole, you can start with gonadotropins. That if you finish your CC on 6th day, you can start gonadotropins, vary from 7th day. And you can use gonadotropins with or without antagonist. And I'll tell you in detail these things. We see letrozole is a wonderful drug. So few lines about the aromatase inhibitor, that is letrozole, especially in women with PCOS. So little bit about letrozole. The Cochrane review came out reasonably recently, has shown very large review with 26 randomized trials, has shown that letrozole and clomiphene, when you compare them, the birth rate is higher, but letrozole, whether you have planned relations, whether you have IUI, the results are better with letrozole. In fact, letrozole typically gives as good results as ovarian drilling without the risk of hyperstimulation and without the risk of twins, which happens with the ovarian stimulation. So letrozole appears to improve live birth rate and pregnancy rates in subfertile women with anovulatory PCOS compared to clomiphene citrate. The quality of this evidence is low, and the finding should be regarded with some caution. There appears to be no difference in effectiveness between letrozole and laparoscopic ovarian drilling. But with letrozole, we see ovarian hyperstimulation was a very rare event. Mr. Rajnish, you could hear me properly?
What happened, ma'am? Any help required?
No, no, I am,
You're audible, ma'am. Yes.
okay, you're audible. Okay. So low dose HMG versus clomiphene citrate in some fertile couples. So we see letrozole gives pretty good outcomes. Other things, low dose gonadotropins. Most of us are little worried to use gonadotropins for IUI. But remember that if you use a very small dose, that half of the 1 ml gonadotropin, instead of clomiphene, the results are fairly good. You get 1 follicle or 2 follicles, the endometrium is good, and the success rate are actually better. So low dose gonadotropin for IUI is a pretty good option when compared with ovarian stimulation with CC. HMG stimulation was characterized by a higher clinical pregnancy rate. That is, with HMG, we get pregnancy rates 14.4% versus CC 9.0%. Higher live birth rate with HMG, we get 13.8%. With CC, it is 8.7%. But we see the multiple live birth rate is definitely higher when we use HMG. And there is a protocol, one more protocol that is called clomiphene citrate stair-step protocol versus traditional protocol in patients with PCOS. So a randomized control trial was done, and it has shown that if you start with 50 milligrams of clomiphene, after 5 days, if you find that the egg has not grown at all, then normally some people cancel the cycle when they don't want to use the gonadotropins. So we can use higher dose of clomiphene citrate, that is 100 milligrams, for the next very day instead of cancel the cycle. And as you finish your 50 milligrams, you start with 100 milligrams. If you see there is no good egg is forming. So this is called stair-step protocol, stepping up the dose of clomiphene in the same cycle, and you might have the ability to grow an egg without wasting an entire month for treatment. This is only required when you don't want to use gonadotropins. If you already start clomiphene citrate, you can always increase the dose of clomiphene. The impact of ovarian stimulation on the outcome of IUI. But like I said, you can combine the clomiphene or the letrozole with the gonadotropins in the later half. You can add gonadotropins. In fact, letrozole combined with HMG gives you the best outcomes in anovulatory or even in ovulatory patients. So that is something good which you can really use in your ovarian stimulation protocol. In ovulatory women without ovarian stimulation, live birth rate was just 7.6%, and when stimulated with letrozole and HMG, it was 12% with IUI. So in anovulatory women stimulated with letrozole and HMG, results were 13.6% with IUI. So in ovulatory women, ovarian stimulation with letrozole combined with HMG achieved a significantly improved live birth rate, but definitely HMG stimulation resulted in a high risk of twins. So if you want to have a protocol, fixed protocol, we can always use clomiphene citrate with gonadotropins, letrozole with gonadotropins. Definitely letrozole is better. So give letrozole 2.5 milligram from second to sixth day, and then add gonadotropins. In normal patients, you can add HMG from 7th, 8th, 9th day and ask the patient to come and do the follicular study, or you can use FSH when the patient is of PCOS. So you can follow this regime. Now the problems encountered in ovulation induction. When you are doing ovarian stimulation, you are bound to encounter many problems. One of the commonest problems, which often is overlooked completely, is that of premature LH surge. 20% of your patients will have a premature LH surge, which has a deleterious effect on fertilization and pregnancy rate. And you won't even be aware of it. Other common problems are ovarian hyperstimulation, poor endometrium, and we just discussed that in a bit. Now the use of antagonist, indications and uses. Looking at the premature ovarian surge, GnRH antagonist is the best way out rather than testing for the urine test, for LH surge, etc. Just use it. In gonadotropin, in GnRH antagonist, it's inexpensive, easily available. Even small doses, 0.25 cc subcutaneously of GnRH antagonist to be started when the egg is about 30 to 14 millimeter and continue till the day of the trigger. Will give you complete control of the cycle, and you can even avoid weekends you can convert that cycle to an IVF cycle without losing any benefit. So antagonist is a very good option. So clinical experience with an ovarian stimulation protocol for IUI, adopting a gonadotropin releasing hormone antagonist at low dose. In fact, when we use a antagonist, we can use a very small dose of antagonist. And this particular study released just 6 months ago says that even if you use half dose of antagonist, you will get pretty good outcomes. So the cost will be further reduced and the outcomes will be still pretty good. So patients adopting GnRH antagonist at low doses had a pregnancy rate 21.7% that was significantly higher in comparison to women receiving HMG only, that is 8.7%. Adding a reduced dose of GnRH antagonist to the control ovarian stimulation for IUI cycles significantly improves the outcome of the procedure. One important complication is the hyperstimulation. Ovarian hyperstimulation, we have to be very careful. Right from the beginning, when you select the patient, a patient who is PCOS, who has a very high antral follicle count or AMH, or she has any history of previous hyperstimulation, these are the patients will cause you problems. So you be very careful with very slow stimulation on these patients. So if we see the protocol, what protocol finally you should use for IUI? You can use your CC or letrozole, preferably letrozole to be used 2.5 milligram from 2nd to 6th day. From 7th day onwards, you use gonadotropins, either HMG or FSH, or you can use two protocols for antagonists, that is fixed protocol or flexible protocol. In flexible protocol, whenever the follicle size is 13 to 40 millimeter, we give very low doses of antagonist subcutaneously till the day of the trigger. We have to monitor completely, and gonadotropins should be given side by side with antagonist. And antagonist may or may not be used, but we have already seen the results are much better with antagonist. So you can use this protocol nowadays. Induction of final follicle maturation with the GnRH agonist remain at risk of undergoing gonadotropins. So the patients who are risk, where we see the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation and patient is showing more follicles developing, never give her SCG. If you don't give her SCG, you will not push her into hyperstimulation. What you can use is agonist, GnRH agonist as a trigger. A small dose, that is 1 ml, 1 milligram of leupride can be given as a trigger. So this will also give you good benefits. The only thing is, if there are many eggs, multiple pregnancy risk still remains. So there will be no hyperstimulation, but multiple pregnancy may still result. And so these patients, again, you have to be very careful. The use of GnRH agonist for trigger was associated with a favorable reproductive outcome and no incidence of ovarian hyperstimulation. But the rate of multiple pregnancy, nevertheless, was found to be elevated. So we have to take lots of precautions using trigger. Very common problem we usually see in our day-to-day practice is poor endometrial development. What we can do in many cases is modify. One important thing that we see very often, particularly when we are using Clomifene, is poor endometrial development. And there are many things that gynecologist tries to do in order to improve the endometrium. Very often use aspirin, sildenafil, estrogen, SCG, hysteroscopy, GCSF. Unfortunately, only a few of them work. A pilot study to prevent thin endometrium in patients undergoing Clomifene treatment was done. What we can do in many cases, we can modify the Clomifene protocol. For example, if you are using a high dose of Clomifene, go on to just 25 milligrams. This will give you one follicle and a much better endometrium. Or you can start your Clomifene from day 1 instead of day 3 or 4. So this will again will still cause a good follicle with a much better endometrium. So modify the doses of timing of the chlorophyll is one option. So this is a challenge for us, treating patients with thin endometrium. Another thing which really helps in thin endometrium in many cases is granulocyte colony stimulating factor, which is GCSF. So a small dose of GCSF infused into the uterine cavity when you find a thin endometrium on the day of the trigger actually helps to improve the endometrial thickness by 1 or 2 millimeter in 24 hours. Another thing that really works is sildenafil. So sildenafil in well-selected patients started right at the beginning of the cycle for up to the day of trigger, vaginally or orally, actually helps a lot. Other drugs like arginine, vitamin E may have a small role to play. Various ways of getting, and we are also use very minor doses of HCG or even infusing 500 units of HCG into the uterine cavity will help. So there are many simple things which you can do for improving the situation of a very poor endometrium. Thin endometrium is known to adversely affect reproductive performance. Treatment of thin endometrium remains a challenge and future large researches are required. Monitoring of the cycle, we hardly do much monitoring for IUI cycles, only a follicular monitoring, and then this is done with transvaginal sonography. We never go for blood levels or other detailed testing. For IUI, we don't need so much of monitoring. Now, early versus when to give trigger. So much of confusion among the gynecologists is there. That is early versus late HCG administration of trigger for ovulation in the mild stimulated IUI cycles. A randomized control trial was done. People already worried about whether we should give the HCG, whether when the egg is 16 or 18 or 20. Now it has been found recently that it doesn't really matter between 16 or 18 or 20. Whenever you give HCG, if the quality of HCG is good, ovulation will still happen. Ovulation will still happen. So 612 infertile women candidates were there for IUI, received HMG 75 international units per day from cycle day 4 to 8, and then as per ovarian response, ovulation was randomly triggered. HCG 5000 IU was given. Then the leading follicle diameter ranged between either 16, 16.9 early HCG group or 18 or 18.9 late HCG group, and IUI was performed approximately 36 hours later. What we see, HCG administered when the largest follicle size reaches 16 or 16.9 millimeter leads to similar clinical and ongoing pregnancy rates as when it reaches 18 or 18.9 millimeter in IUI cycle. So we see there is no difference. You give minimum size of the follicle should be 16 millimeter. It should not be more than 22 millimeter. But factors affecting pregnancy rate. What method of sperm washing you should use? In addition to clinical simplicity and robustness, a sperm preparation method needs to select not just the more motile and morphologically normal spermatozoa, but also those spermatozoa with reduced DNA damage. So we see best method of preparing the semen. It's pretty much documented now. The density gradient is the best method because it causes the least spermatozoa damage and DNA damage, and reactive oxygen species are much reduced, so that this seems to be the best outcome in terms of quality motility and least damage to the sperm. So most of your cases, you should go for density gradient. Now the ideal timing of, what is the timing of IUI? Many studies were done to know the timing of IUI. It is well known that oocytes and spermatozoa have a limited period of survival. We see when one oocyte releases from the ovary, it has a lifetime for 12 to 24 hours, maximum 30 hours. And spermatozoa have a life for 24 to 72 hours. So therefore, accurate timing of insemination is essential. It was generally accepted that insemination should be performed just before or maximally 10 hours after ovulation. According to current available evidence, a wider time frame can be followed, that is from 12 to 36 hours after SCG injection. What is single and double IUI? Single IUI is performed around 36 to 42 hours after post-trigger or 24 hours post-LS surge. Double IUI is performed twice, once 24 hours post-trigger and again 40 to 48 hours after post-trigger. Single versus double insemination in the stimulated cycle for subfertile couples. Why did we dismiss double IUI? In 2003, Cochrane systematic review was done. 3 studies were done on 386 women. So they say that no benefit of double IUI. However, updated intervention review was done in 2007. 6 studies were done in 1785 women. So what they say, double IUI resulted in significant benefit over single IUI in the treatment of subfertile couples with husband sperm. So still there is confusion whether you have to go for single IUI, double IUI. Comparative study was done between single or double IUI insemination in control ovarian hyperstimulation cycle. So we divided the patient into 3 groups. Group A, single IUI 34 hours after SCG. Group B, double IUI 12 hours and 34 hours after SCG. Group C, double IUI was done 34 and 60 hours after SCG. So what was the result in group A, where single IUI was done 34 hours after SCG, result was 7.1%, and group B, double IUI done 12 and 34 hours after SCG, results were 16.1%, and group C, double IUI 34 and 60 hours after SCG, results were only 5.4%. So 2 IUIs performed 12 and 34 hours after SCG trigger is the most cost-effective regime for women undergoing control ovarian hyperstimulation cycle with CC and gonadotropins. And many studies were done to see the overall pregnancy rate when double IUI was done and single IUI was done. Overall pregnancy rate in single IUI group was 11% and double IUI group was 12.8%, and pregnancy rate in cases of male factors 9.8%, double IUI group 7.5%. And pregnancy rate in cases of male factor with gonadotropins used for ovarian stimulation. In single IUI group, it was 10.8%, double IUI group, it was 27.5%. So we saw that pregnancy rate, overall pregnancy rate was higher when we treating a male infertility, when the infertility cause is male and gonadotropin stimulation cycle. So they recommend double IUI in cases when we going for IUI for the male factor or where we have given the gonadotropin for hyperstimulation. So many studies also show if we using a donor stimulated cycle, always try to give 2 IUIs. The available evidence, including the Cochrane review, did support the use of double IUI practice within a cycle. New data further suggests that male infertility, male factor infertility, and gonadotropin-induced cycle may benefit from a double IUI, and more systemic studies would be desirable. What are the advantages of double IUI? It is said to increase the chances of conception as sperms are available for a larger duration, for longer duration. The idea of multiple insemination during a cycle is to capture the right moment for fertilization and increase the pregnancy rate. Yes. The increased concentration of sperms also helps in cases of male factor infertility using husband sperm. So this was the discussion, how many IUIs to be done. Now we have to see at what time we should process the semen, at what time we should do the IUI. Semen processed within 30 minutes after collection resulted in a higher pregnancy rate, that is 48%. Then that process 30 to 60 minutes after collection. So we should try to process the semen as early as possible. And IUI performed within 90 minutes of collection gave a higher pregnancy rate. We see in our day-to-day practice, every gynecologist is so busy in her OPD. So the husband collects the sperm, semen, and we put in the incubator. It is lying for hours. This is not a good practice. Within 30 minutes, we should start processing of semen. And within 90 minutes of collection, we should start the IUI. Now, what type of catheters should be used for IUI? Either soft or firm. What type of catheter should you use? Typically, do the use of a soft catheter. Which company, which make, it doesn't really matter as long as the catheter is atraumatic. Next is flushing the catheter. Flushing and loading the catheter. I think this is a good idea to flush the catheter. So we see during manufacturing of the catheter, there are always a micro collection of the toxins. So whenever we flush the catheter with the media, so we can have a layer of flushing media. So there will be no damage to the sperm. And how we load the catheter, we always have to withdraw or draw the semen sample, not to push the semen sample. So first you flush your catheter, then you withdraw or draw the semen sample from the tube. It is not a good idea to push the semen sample. Procedure of IUI, that is very, very important. Patient should be in a lithotomy position, and there should be a good light to see, to visualize the cervix. And we don't have to use any betadine solution or any antiseptic solution. Nothing should be used. That would be toxic. So clean with only saline and then expose the cervix. And whichever fashion you want to do, if you have an associate or an assistant, you can use two Sims speculum, anterior and posteriorly, or you can use a single Sims speculum and anterior vaginal wall retractor, or you can use a Cusco's speculum. The only suggestion is always keep a metal cannula by your side, because if the uterus is acutely anteverted, may be a good idea sometimes to negotiate the internal loss with the metal cannula if the normal cannula doesn't pass through. So all methods work as long as the procedure is atraumatic, and you should cross the internal loss, should not touch the fundus, because uterine contraction will be there and semen sample can come out, or patient can also feel pain if you touch the fundus. So results will be poorer. And if you are not able to negotiate your catheter, even with speculum, you can use Alice forceps also. You gently hold the anterior lip of cervix with Alice, and till you pass your catheter, till you cross your catheter up to the internal os, you can remove this Alice forceps. So whatever the method you choose for IUI, it should be atraumatic and simple method. And one thing more, you can leave your catheter after IUI for few seconds, that is 30 seconds. You must have seen your day-to-day practice. When you remove your catheter, just immediately after doing IUI, the sperm sample comes out. When you leave the catheter for 30 seconds, semen sample, let the semen sample, give the time to semen sample to go to the tubes. So if you leave the catheter for 30 seconds would be better. Now the effect of cervical mucus aspiration before IUI. Also a small tip, aspirate the cervical mucus with a syringe prior to putting in your catheter. So we do this in IVF, and doing this in IUI as well improves outcome. So pregnancy, we have seen the pregnancy rates was 15% in the cervical mucus aspiration group and 9.9% in the control group. So this is a good technique. There are many difficult situations you can have in IUI. When you see with a stenosis cervix, a soft thin catheter may be tried, or sonographic guidance to be used. Rarely dilatation can be done. If you are not able to dilate that time, you can ask the patient. You do the IUI, see the result. If it is a failure, you can ask the patient to come on the next cycle on first or second day. You can do the dilatation that time. Efficacy of passive uterine straightening during IUI on pregnancy rates and ease of technique. Also try to do your IUI in a full bladder. What this does is it straightens out the anteverted uterus and actually makes it in the line, makes the difficulty much easier and lesser, and as a result improves your outcome. So the pregnancy, we have seen the pregnancy rates was higher in the full bladder group than in the empty bladder group, that is 13.5% versus 7.4%. The risk of undergoing difficult IUI was higher in the empty bladder group than the full bladder group, that is 10.0% versus 37.8%. So this is a good practice to do IUI in full bladder. The use of ultrasound during IUI in unexplained infertility may improve pregnancy outcomes. Another suggestion, if you have an ultrasound machine available, do your IUI under ultrasound control. This reduces the difficulty. Again, anything which is less traumatic, less difficult, gives you better outcomes. So all three modifications in a lab, these modifications in the lab will help you improve the outcomes. So USG guidance in IUI improves pregnancy rates and reduces the frequency of difficult IUI. Now the luteal phase support. Efficacy of luteal phase with vaginal progesterone in IUI. Luteal phase support, most of us give, but actually scientifically it is recommended only in cases in which gonadotropins have been used for stimulation. If you are using clomiphene, there may not be much need for the luteal support, but there are many studies. They show that you can use luteal phase support, and however, all of us, I think in your practice after IUI, all of us give luteal phase support, but it is a subject of debate. Post-insemination instructions. There is not much that a woman now can do to improve her chances of pregnancy. She can take rest after IUI for 15 to 20 minutes, not more than this is required. She can get back to her normal work as well as her regular sex life. Luteal support may or may not be given. A pregnancy test is done 14 days after IUI. So the last part is the controversy. The last part of my talk is a controversy to do or not to do. IUI for unexplained infertility. Because recently the Cochrane review came out last year, has also said that there was no conclusive evidence of a difference in live birth between couples with unexplained infertility doing IUI or time intercourse, with or without ovarian stimulation. So this was quite a dramatic statement by the Cochrane review, and this actually was because of NICE guidelines. The NICE guidelines which came out in 2013, these guidelines from UK, which are very well followed and respected throughout the UK, said that expectant management for 2 years is the best choice when the woman is quite young. And all she needs to know is when she is ovulating and keeps timing of time intercourse during that time. And this will give you equal or better outcomes because there will be no multiple pregnancy rates as compared to IUI. And they say the NICE guidelines said that when there has been a long period of infertility, IUI actually does not give much benefit. So a radical statement by them, and as a result, there was a lot of fear regarding IUI in UK. A year ago, though there was a survey carried out in UK after the NICE guidelines to see whether people were actually following these dramatic guidelines or they were not. It was found that despite the recommendation that IUI should not be routinely offered, 96% of clinics in the UK continue to offer IUI. They told the patients, but they told their patient about it, but continued to do IUI. So they obviously, majority of the doctors found some merits in IUI. So examination, no more NICE guide. And in fact, the study came out just a month ago, said IUI, no more Mr. Guy, as I take off from the NICE guidelines saying that even today the live birth rates are pretty good in the first or the second cycle. So the recommendation is the proper cycle probability of live birth from 21 to 5% depending on the patient's age, cycle number and parity. And if you are persist for 1 or 2 cycles in well-selected patients, younger patients, those who had a previous pregnancy, the results will be fairly good. So there is really no strong recommendation from other studies or guidelines about not doing IUI. So couples with unexplained infertility, subfertility and unfavorable prognosis, a randomized controlled trial was done comparing the effectiveness of IVF with single embryo transfer versus IUI. So tell your patients that one cycle of IVF may be as effective as 3 cycles of IUI. And so patient can also decide they are in a rush, if they have been married too long, if they are older, select other parameters. And in selected patients, IUI may still work. Now the predictors of pregnancy and live birth rates in couple with unexplained infertility after controlled ovarian stimulation and IUI. New predictors of IUI have come out. The age of the patient, waist circumference, even the income level has an effect upon the outcome. How long she's been fertile, infertile, whether she had any previous pregnancy. If it was a pregnancy loss, all of us, these affects the outcome of pregnancy. Predictive factors for pregnancy after IUI. So eventually, the predictive factors for pregnancy are a good patient. A good prognostic patient is one who is under 30 years, with cervical or anovulatory infertility and more than 5 million sperm count, which is motile, with 1 or 2 good eggs developing, with a good endometrium, and doing the IUI with a soft catheter. All of these things will actually eventually give you much better outcomes in IUI. A word of caution also, does ovulation induction and IUI affect perinatal outcomes in singleton? So let me conclude with a word of caution. This particular study was quite an eye-opener. 246 pregnancies with ovarian stimulation and IUI, and they compared it with natural pregnancies and deliveries. There was a statistically significant difference between the group in first trimester abortion rates, intrauterine demise rates, the perinatal outcomes were much worse with the ovarian stimulation and IUI. All oligohydramnios, preterm babies for higher admission in an ICU, etc. So nothing is free of risk. We see more risk when we stimulate the patient and do the IUI. So nothing is free of risk. When you are counseling a patient, tell them that there is a possibility of a slightly higher problem in pregnancies and with a fetus, or with higher morbidity after ovulation stimulation with or without IUI. So IUI is still the first line of treatment in subfertility and is a simple, effective, inexpensive procedure. So we know at the end of the day, IUI is the first line treatment in subfertility. It is simple, it's effective, and it's an inexpensive procedure, and maybe a first line treatment even today in well selected patients. So at the end of the day, all of us are working towards giving our patients a lovely, healthy, live baby to take home. And thank you so much. The difference between failure and success is doing a thing nearly right and doing a thing exactly right. Thank you so much for patient here.
Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you.
Thank you for this fantastic presentation. There
Yes.
are a lot of applauds and comments which tell you about good presentation, updated presentations.
Oh,
and
thank you so much.
comments. So thank you, ma'am. Should we take the question and answer?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
have
yeah.
a lot of
Sure,
questions.
sure.
So ma'am, first question from Dr. Tarini. She's
Okay.
asking, in poor responders in IUI, can we do double stimulation?
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Tell me
In
again.
poor responders in
Yes.
IUI, can we do double stimulation?
Double stimulation.
Yeah.
What does she mean by double stimulation? Drugs? 2 drugs or too many drugs?
She has
Dr.
not.
Tarini?
Dr. Tarini, if you can just mention into comments. In the meantime, ma'am, I'll take another question
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Dr.
Sure.
Sandhya Singh.
Yeah.
Dr. Sandhya Singh asking, can HMG be used in every case?
Actually, we have many studies to see whether we should use gonadotropins or not. But larger studies, they have always shown that whenever we use gonadotropins, the results are definitely better. In my practice, and I know many of IVF specialists or infertility specialists, they always use HMG, and we have seen very good results with HMG. I personally, in all cases of IUI, I use gonadotropins.
Okay, great. So that is the answer, Dr. Sandhya. I hope you got the answer. Ma'am, second question is from Dr. Anubha Agarwal.
Yes.
She is asking, if liquefaction time of semen is very high, what to do?
Yeah. Very good question. I said that after 30 minutes, we should start processing our semen. But when the liquefaction is high, we can wait for 1 hour. Or you can pass the semen from the syringe again and again. That will be liquefy the semen. Okay,
Okay.
Anubha? Yeah.
Thank you,
So
ma'am, for
that will
this
help in
answer.
liquefaction.
Great, great. Ma'am, one of the doctors is asking on which day of cycle CC can be restarted.
CC can be, if we have already started at second day, you have given the smaller doses, and if you see follicles are not growing, you can increase the doses. And if you have not started your CC even after second, third day, you can start from fifth day also, but not later than fifth day.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Thank you.
thin endometrium will be there. As we have seen that with CC is an anti-estrogenic drug. Most of the time we have thin endometrium. If we start later, the chances of thin endometrium will be more. So this is told that CC should be start from first or second day or third day, and not later than fifth day. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for the answer, ma'am. Ma'am, a question has been asked by doctor. He's not mentioned his name, but he is saying, how
Yeah.
can we prevent early luteinization of follicles?
For this thing, we can use the complete protocol. That is, we should use gonadotropins, not CC, and antagonist should be simultaneously should be used. So protocol should be for the early to prevent the early luteinization of the follicle. You start low dose, that is 37.5 of gonadotropin from second day, and you do the follicle monitoring. This is step of protocol, and you do the monitoring. And whenever the size of the follicle is 13 to 14 millimeter, you start antagonist. And simultaneously, if you want to increase the doses of gonadotropin, you can increase and control the cycle with the help of antagonist. You can use the antagonist whenever the size is 13 to 14 millimeter if you want to use the flexible protocol. And when the size of the follicle is 16 to 20 millimeter, you give the trigger. This is the best protocol which can prevent luteinization of the follicle.
Thank you, ma'am, for the answer, detailed answer. Ma'am, a series of question on double IUI now.
Okay.
Is double insemination better than single?
Actually, if this depends on for what reason are you going for IUI. If you see the semen quality is poorer and you are going for IUI for the male infertility, so it is better to do 2 IUIs in these cases. Got it? And if the semen count is good and you are going to do IUI for unexplained infertility, this is better to do 1 IUI. See, life of the oocyte when it comes from the ovary, it is very, very small. It is 12 to 24 hours. And the life of sperm is around 40 to 70 hours. So sperm can wait for the egg because life is more of sperm. So you see what is the cause for infertility. If the semen quality is good, you go for 1 IUI. If the semen quality is not good, do 2 IUIs. This is the basics. Ideally, what we say, the sperm should wait for the eggs. As you go for dating, male and female go for dating, male should wait for the female. Here also, sperm should go first, then the egg should come, because the life of the egg is shorter than the sperm.
That is a fantastic relevance from the life. Ma'am, a question has been continued by Dr. Mridula. She is saying,
Yeah.
double IUI, how many hours apart?
You see, if you have given SCG today, you can do first IUI 12 to 24 hours. As the life of oocyte is only 12 to 24 hours. Or second IUI, you can repeat on 30 to 48 hours. You give SCG today and ask the patient to come tomorrow and do first IUI tomorrow and ask the patient to come day after tomorrow, second IUI to be done on day after tomorrow. This is the thing.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Ma'am, a question has come from Dr. Richa. She is asking,
Yeah.
which is better for LPD, natural progesterone or Dufestron?
There is a debate amongst what luteal support should be given. I think every luteal, every progesterone works very well. Either you used vaginal progesterone or oral progesterone, but the studies are, whichever studies are available, we see Dufastone is the good drug we can use.
Okay, great. Thank you, ma'am, for that answer. Ma'am, Dr. Vikas has asked one question. Unruptured follicle after HCG. Is
Yes.
repeat higher dose needed?
Actually, unruptured follicle we find in cases where the quality of SCG is not good. See the quality, what kind of quality you are using SCG. It should be, if you are repeatedly seeing the unruptured follicle, you can use recombinant SCG. Nowadays we are using recombinant, or repeatedly if we are seeing this happening, you can use antagonist with your gonadotropins for high stimulation of the cycle.
Okay, so use of antagonist is the
Yeah.
answer. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, one question from Dr. Gayatri Singh.
Yes.
She's saying, please tell about documentation required to avoid legal issues.
For IUI, there is a ICMR form. You can take the consent before going for IUI, take the Aadhaar card and identity for husband and wife, because it can happen. One patient came to my clinic, one male and female, one couple came, and the male was not the husband of female. So it can happen. You have to see Aadhaar card or identity card of both the male and female and take the consent. This is the thing. Proper consent and ICMR form.
Okay, so consent and ICMR form, both things are very important.
Yeah.
Ma'am, one question comes from Dr. Soma Singh. How
Yes.
can HMG is helpful for male factor?
HMG for male factor. HMG is given for stimulation, ovarian stimulation. We don't use HMG for male factor. We don't use HMG in male patients. We are going for IUI for the male infertility factor. We can use HMG for ovulation induction.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, for that answer. I'll take last two questions, ma'am. Yeah, there's another big question which has came in now. But Dr. Vikas is asking,
Yes.
is E2,
Yes.
P4 testing and monitoring needed for IUI?
No, not at all, Dr. Vikas. This is not needed. You see the size of the follicle, you can see the flow of the follicle, you see the endometrium. Is endometrium more than 7? If you see a good follicle on your ultrasound machine, you can go ahead. This is a very simple procedure. This is inexpensive. That's why this is popular. If the cost will be increased, so no meaning of IUI. We don't have to increase the cost. And this is not required also.
Okay, so Dr. Vikas, that is not required. Thank you, ma'am, for this answer. Ma'am, one last question from Dr. Nisha Jain.
Yes.
She's asking effect of centrifugation on sperms without temperature control.
Yes.
That is the question.
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Tell me again.
Effect of centrifugation on sperms without temperature control.
Definitely, you have to control the temperature whenever you are doing a centrifugation. Otherwise, the sperm motility quality will be decreased. Definitely, you have to maintain the temperature.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Do you want to take last two questions or should
Yeah, sure. I can take.
Ma'am, one question Dr. Rachita Chawla has asked.
Yes.
Ma'am, what is the angle of distortion you mentioned? How to measure it?
Yeah, you cannot measure. You can see. You can visualize. Whenever you are doing laparoscopy, is if the acute angle, the tube is bent upon itself acutely, that is less than 45. If up to 45, you can go for IUI or other means. If it is less than 45, that is tube is acutely bent upon itself, you don't waste much time on IUI, go for IVF directly. This is the thing. If the angle is more than 45, you can try IUI or other means. Got it?
Thank you, ma'am. We'll take last one question from Dr. Seema Tripathi.
Yes.
Question is a little 3 lines question. So
Okay.
if the follicle is somewhere around 19 mm
Okay.
with all good peripheral blood flow,
Yes.
and by itself the follicle was about to rupture, and
Yes.
now we give trigger and expect it to rupture after 36 hours and plan IUI,
Yes.
will we not miss it because it got ruptured on its own sometime which no one knows?
It happens many times. If you see the follicle size is good, in my practice, I ask the patient to come to my clinic whenever she has pain in abdomen. She might tell you if she has pain in abdomen, like pain during periods, dysphoria, she'll come to you, and then you can do IO at that time. But you see the when the ovulation occurs, the oocyte remains there for 24 hours. So if you feel it is going to rupture, definitely you ask the patient to come on the next day.
Okay, that was the question, ma'am. So I think with this we can now stop. There was Dr. Nupur Mittal from Thane who was trying to
Yeah. She's my
activate her.
cousin.
Acha, she's your cousin.
Yeah.
She is trying to activate her video, and I have sent a request. I think she has started a video. Dr. Nupur, can you just say hi to everybody, because I have sent a request to start your video.
Yeah, I can. My video has started,
Great.
Oh,
but my
Nupur, how are
chats,
you?
I'm fine. But my chats have not been read out. I had posted 3 questions. Can you
ask
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You ask the
Huh.
questions, whatever you
So,
want.
first of all, it was a very, very nice presentation, Didi. Congratulations to you.
Thank you so much.
And the first question was, since I'm getting my samples prepared by another lab,
Okay.
so which flushing media should I buy just to flush out the catheter?
Okay.
And secondly, the prepared sperms,
Yes.
the life of the prepared semen sperms in the semen sample is how much? It is, some people say it is only 3 to 6 hours. So doing a double IUI after 12 hours, will it really have any utility? The first IUI.
First question, what media? I do IVF. I do IVF media. IVF culture media is there always with me. So I do flushing with IVF culture media. This is the thing. And
Okay.
wash my semen sample with that media only.
So we can just keep by
Yeah.
that IVF.
Or any other media, whatever media you are doing your IVI, with that media only you can flush the catheter.
Okay, okay. And also that point which you had mentioned about aspiration of the cervical mucus.
Yes.
So how exactly do you go about it? You just put a syringe,
You
or
inspect the cervix properly, and you take a syringe and just go to the external os. It comes out very nicely, and you pull the syringe. It will come out all the mucus. Or earbud can be used. Earbud piece of earbud or syringe.
Okay.
Syringe. Okay.
Thank you, Didi.
Oh, thank you.
Again, once again, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nupur ma'am, for your questions and interaction. Dear all participants, we took almost 15 to 16 questions, but due to time span, it may not be possible to take everybody's question.
You can take one or two questions more if you want.
Ma'am, we have almost closed the windows of questions.
Oh.
So if you don't mind, I have my divisional head, Mr. Rajiv Agarwal, with me. Rajiv sir, can you please?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Amit, and good afternoon, everybody. I am Rajiv Agarwal, Division Head for IVA, Division of MQ Pharmaceutical Limited, pioneer in IVF and gynecology. On behalf of MQ, I thanks from the bottom of the heart Dr. Latika Agarwal for delivering a wonderful session and sparing the time for us. Thank you, madam. I also belong to Bareilly, so I am a bit nostalgic also.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you. Thank you all the doctors for attending this webinar.
I want to thank all the participants sparing their valuable time. Thank you so much,
thank
all the doctors participating.
Thank you so much.
Stay healthy and safe. We all wish you very healthy and safe life. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good day to all. Thank you, participants. I am closing off the session now. It was nice seeing you all.
Thank you so much. Bye.